The Army says it has launched an investigation after a video surfaced on social media showing trainee soldiers alongside former English Defence League leader Tommy Robinson and chanting his name. Reports suggest one of the trainees could be discharged.
The most honourable morning I've ever had, anyway. Class, eh? Makes it all worth it.
The encounter is said to have taken place in a service station outside of Watford. Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, also published several photos on social media posing with the recruits. In August, the far-right activist was freed on bail after winning an appeal against a contempt of court conviction. The Army said it would investigate the circumstances surrounding the video and photos, and that anyone who is in breach of the Army's values and standards will face action. Well, to talk about this, I'm now joined by Weyman Bennett, co-convener of Stand Up to Racism and Joint Secretary of Unite Against Fascism, and author at Spiked Online, Benedict Spence. Thank you both very much for joining us. Weyman, really, what have these guys done wrong? They're in the Army, but that doesn't mean that they're not individuals with their own political views. Why do you think the Army should be taking such an action against them and clearly not happy by them standing with this man?
Well, let's be clear that Tommy Robinson or Stephen Yaxley is a disreputable character, and actually I think he's posing with the Army in order to try and get respectability for his very poor views. I was born in an Army hospital, my father was in the Army. It's that the values that are held up is because Stephen Yaxley has deep racist views, particularly towards Muslims. And considering the necessary actions of the British Army in its deployment, I think the idea that racism or Islamophobia is something which is acceptable is something which we have to disreputable. This is not rumour. He was in the BNP. He organised 214 demonstrations which led to violence, in particular violence aimed at Muslim community and other communities, and I think that he's not a good representative of society. He should be something which is rejected.
He says he's a politician, he's in the EDL, he's the leader of that, and he denies he's racist. But the fact is, these are young men in uniform standing with a man who's perceived by so many to have a very unsavoury background and characteristic.
Well, I mean, as Weyman said, he's clearly used this as an opportunity to try and curry a bit of favour, to try to create a bit of noise, as it were. So I think we need to bear that in mind, that he's the one that's posted this to social media. He's clearly the one that has gone out to use this to his own benefit. What concerns me is that the Army is talking about investigating what these soldiers have done. I think it's quite clear, certainly from everything that I've read up until this point, that they were in a service station, you know, out on manoeuvres, wherever it was. They were off barracks. They're young recruits. They're squaddies. They come from, by and large, they tend to come from quite disadvantaged white working class, and it's wrong, in fact, to say white working class backgrounds across the spectrum. Now, when you are going through basic training, or the early stage of your Army career, there is a great deal of camaraderie, but there is also a great deal of mischief. There's the element of the taboo, getting up to all sorts of hijinks and larks. They're outside, as it were, the control of their senior officers. They come across somebody who is, it doesn't matter whether or not he's disreputable, he is a public figure and he is known, and there is the element maybe there of the unavailable, of the taboo right there. And so they crowd round, they take a few photographs, they chant some silly things. I don't really see what the harm is right there. They haven't actually endorsed any of his views. They're just having a bit of a laugh.
Meaningless, harmless activity.
I think we have to be very careful about, you know, as I said, my father's in the Army, it's a multiracial institution, and being organised, chanting a known racist name. I mean,
well, that's the point. He was actually, they were chanting his name.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I don't think that that is necessarily endorsement of his views.
Really?
No, I don't think that is at all, any more than if I were to chant, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn," I'd necessarily be endorsing his views. But if I met him in the street, there's nothing to say I wouldn't stop and take a selfie with him. It's something to let your mates know about. You've come across somebody who is well known, for good or for bad. Either way, it's something that gets out there, and it's a bit of a
Well, you're talking about your father's military background. Are you concerned that this sort of behaviour could put young people off joining the army?
I don't think it just only put young people off. I just think that, you know, my own father was deployed all over the world, and the idea that the people internationally will see this and people say they're neutral when they go to different countries or serve in Muslim countries, the idea that they're chanting somebody who's known Islamophobe, if anything happens after that, I think that people will question the veracity.
Is that really a fair point, you think? Is xenophobia maybe pursued by young recruits who will be serving in our name?
In the grand history of the British Army's involvement in Muslim countries, I doubt that this is the thing that's going to wind most people up when it comes to how the British Army engages with Muslims overseas. I don't think that this is going to have much of an impact in the grand scheme of things. But, you know, really, what is the image that the British Army is trying to come out with? It's got this new recruitment campaigns all about inclusivity, rather, not exclusivity, and diversity and tolerance, and that's all very well. I don't think that a couple of squaddies, you know, chanting and, you know, having a bit of a laugh whilst they're outside their barracks, whilst they're just at a petrol station, I don't think that that's going to massively undermine that. I doubt that these are bad individuals.
But the army's taking it seriously, aren't they?
Sorry?
The army is taking it seriously.
The army is taking it seriously, but I think, again, that you have to look, therefore, is that more about sort of the image that they want to give off, rather than actually whatever army values are? I doubt very much that this is going to put off people of any kind of ethnic background from joining the armed forces. I think possibly the army have slightly overreacted to that. But of course, if there is any evidence that they are endorsing a political message, then, you know, our members of the armed forces are meant to be neutral. That is fine, that they should investigate that. As far as I can see, there hasn't been.
Let's be clear. The BNP, which he was a member of, has been designated, could be called a Nazi organisation. And I want to be really clear about this. Public servants, the police, the security services, to be endorsing or even chanting somebody's name that can bring us all into disrepute is not something to be taken lightly, because people are questioned by this. I think trying to say it's hijinks, we're talking about people that are armed with deadly force and are supposed to make quick judgments in things. And actually, just to dismiss it, I think actually leads to a much more dangerous situation. It seems that I think he's somebody who shouldn't be associated with the British Army, nor should they associate. And that's the reason why people...
Did these guys purposely associate themselves with this? I mean, it was Robinson who posted the video, and they just happened to bump into him, and the video was filmed.
I think we should be really clear that I don't think we should be so naive not to understand why Robinson posted it and why the actual... If it was the police or the army, why they've taken such a jaundiced view of this. Tommy Robinson has organised very violent demonstrations. When he brought soldiers onto the demonstration that took place after Luton inside Stoke, the army took a very clear view. Plus, after National Action was involved in the killing of Joe Cox, in which 2 people in the army were captains, the government and the army have said that they don't want this to happen again. And that's part of the reason why they've said they want to make sure those views are never mainstreamed inside the army. And I think that's the reason why they're taking it seriously, because they have had those incidents and they want to make sure that doesn't reoccur.
Certainly true that recently, I think a couple of former members of the armed forces, or where they were at the time, were discharged for being members of the National Front. So clearly this is something the army can't take too lightly, but all I'm saying is these are not, you know, they're not members of the SAS, they're not actually highly trained special operatives. They're new recruits, they're squaddies, they're young, they're silly, they've got a little bit of freedom, and they're acting up. At the worst, they need maybe a slap on the wrist and told to be a bit more sensible when you're conducting yourself off-base. You know, you are representing your regiment, but really, I don't think that this is a great issue.
But could extremists make this an excuse to target them as a terrorist target as such, because of who they're standing with?
Target the armed forces? I don't. To go back to it, I don't actually think that extremists need that excuse to target members of the armed forces.
If they're taking a picture with Osama bin Laden and because he was a famous person, I don't believe that the army would just say this is a famous. There's a bit of like
that's slightly different. Osama bin Laden.
Well, you see, this is the problem. Right-wing terrorism is seen as a benign way. Tommy Robinson is not a benign person. Actually, what he's trying to do is divide the community in Britain. And actually, for us to take such a light view of it, I think is dangerous.
Okay. Not quite. Well, not quite Osama bin Laden.